Hello, this is Miss Dagenford, and I wanted to help us get started on Tuesday and Wednesday with the beginnings and introduction to cell respiration. So we've been talking about the metabolism of cells and how cells work with energy, and we just finished photosynthesis. So I just put this equation up to help you just be reminded of photosynthesis. What this plant cells are able to do is take carbon dioxide, and through the use of the energy and light and water, they're able to eventually create glucose and then release oxygen. Now, cell respiration is going to look like it's the exact opposite. So you're going to take 6 glucose molecules and you are going to combine that. You're going to combine that with your oxygen. And what you want to see is then 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water. However, ultimately what we want is ATP and lots of it. Now, I always start out by pointing out some of the things that you notice in this equation. Now, by the end of this video, you should be able to identify the equation of cell respiration, and you should be able to have an idea of the general process of cell respiration, what organelle is involved, the beginnings, and then the products. So that's what we're looking for. Now, one thing you should notice is the carbon, and notice the carbon is really going to change a lot. So we end up with 6 carbon dioxide, and I'm hoping what you should notice is that there's something missing. And I did that incorrectly. There should be no 6 there. Sorry about that. So we're missing some hydrogens. The hydrogens have completely been stripped away. And that's going to be something that we look for. In fact, it's so important that I want you to watch for the falling hydrogens and electrons. So just as you might be driving down the road with your parents or family, and you look to the side of the road and you're driving down this hill and you see the sign, and you know that means watch for falling rocks. So I want you to keep your eye on where the hydrogens go. Now, when I say hydrogens, that might be provoking some memories, that might be reminding you of that process where we have a high concentration of hydrogens, and the high proton or hydrogen ion concentration is going to power the production of ATP. And you know what? You're right. If that brings up that model that we did in photosynthesis, you're absolutely right. We're going to see that again. Now, the other thing that you will notice that might be a little familiar is a molecule that acts like NADPH. In fact, it's so similar that it has it can be very confusing. It can be really annoying because it looks the same. But it serves the same function. It's NADH, it's an electron carrier and a hydrogen carrier. And so just as NADPH, you have this nitrogen that has a positive charge, and it's going to be able to accept hydrogens and electrons, and it'll be converted to NADH, and that's what we're going to be seeing as well. So just like photosynthesis, you're going to see this little dump truck molecule. It's a carrier. It's going to drop off the hydrogen electron, and then it's going to come back and pick up more, and then it's going to dump it, and then it's going to come back. Now, what we want to now look at is the idea that glucose is this very high energy molecule. And in fact, plants put a lot of energy from light into this molecule. So now glucose contains a lot of this potential energy. Now, what you can almost think about is 2 people pulling on a rope, and that energy in holding it, if you were to cut that rope, you release that energy. So that force, it's holding in that force, that's potential energy, and you're going to have the same thing in the bonds. The bonds holding carbon and carbon and hydrogen. As you manipulate those bonds, as they're broken, as they're shifted, that's going to release energy. So there's our kind of second um, statement here. If the bonds are broken, if we remove those hydrogen ions, we're releasing energy. And you're allowing these atoms to kind of go to a lower energy state. So one way to think about that is if you have a hill and you've got this big pile of rocks, if you slowly let one rock go down, it's going to fall down to the bottom of the hill. And you're familiar with that idea. You have a high potential energy of the rocks up here, and as it falls down, it gives off energy. And in a chemical sense, that's what's happening to these molecules. They're losing energy. Now, we're going to do a little bit of drawing here, and I want to prep you because what we'll do tomorrow is practice this. So I'll give you the diagrams tomorrow. So the the organelle that we're going to look at where this happens is the mitochondria. And so I want you to go ahead and draw your mitochondria. And it has traditionally a kidney bean shape, but they can move, they can change shape, so they don't always look like a kidney bean. They can just look like a big oval and or more of a round. But it's kind of a classic shape of the mitochondria. So let's go ahead and add our inner membrane. And the inner membrane is a little different in that it has these folds. It just folds in and out and in and out. Now that's going to be something that is going to be very important later. And so there's our membrane. There's our outer. Here's our inner membrane. So far, so good. And then we have these little folds, and the folds have a name. They're called cristae. And so what's going to be important about them is they increase the surface area of the organelle, and that really does affect how much ATP can be made. So what else is there? Well, one last thing. Let me go ahead and highlight it for you. All of the inside of this. Now, if you're taking notes, this might take a little bit of time, so you can do this later if you want. Just kind of indicate this, but it is really helpful to kind of have that image. So all of this inside of the mitochondria, this is called the matrix. So here's our matrix. And so this matrix was going to be it's going to be where the second step occurs. So we'll label that in just a little bit. But there's our matrix. And this matrix is kind of created by the inner membrane. And then we have the intermembrane space. And so that I'm just going to highlight green. So this intermembrane space, and that just goes all around. And that's going to be where we see something somewhat familiar, and that's going to be the high concentration of hydrogens. So on one hand, this is really nice because this is just rehashing some of the things we learned back in photosynthesis. On the other hand, it's somewhat annoying because it's very easy to kind of get everything confused. So I totally get it. And we're going to do lots of practice to really make sure we are clear about everything. So here is our intermembrane space. Okay, so we have three main steps, and then there's going to be one that's kind of a mini step smushed in between two of them. The three steps, let's go ahead and add them over here, or you can put it underneath your drawing. We have glycolysis. We have a step where we are converting a molecule called pyruvate. This is the one that's kind of in between. We have a real big one called Krebs cycle. And then the last one, which you've heard before, is the electron transport chain. Now, this is the one, if you go back to our equation in the beginning, this is the step. Notice we see that oxygen is needed. Well, the oxygen is not really needed until the electron transport chain. So where are these located? So this requires, sorry, let's go ahead and add that. This requires oxygen. So glycolysis is located in the cytoplasm. And then the rest are located in the mitochondria. The conversion to pyruvate is going to happen as it comes into the mitochondria. And then the Krebs cycle happens in the matrix. And then the electron transport chain happens along the inner membrane. So let's go ahead and add that in our diagram. The glycolysis happens outside in the cytoplasm. So the cell would surround everything, and so it's in the cytoplasm of the cell. And then the conversion to pyruvate is happening as it comes into the mitochondria. And then the Krebs cycle would be inside here in the matrix, and there's multiple Krebs cycles as well as multiple glycolysis reactions happening. And then the electron transport system is going to happen along this membrane, which again should somewhat remind you of what's happening in the thylakoid membrane of photosynthesis. And we've got a lot of these happening right there. Now, glycolysis does not require oxygen, and so it is called anaerobic. No oxygen required. The Krebs cycle doesn't need oxygen, but it will shut down if there is no oxygen. And so that's something that I hope intrigues you. And any athlete, if you guys exercise regularly, if you participate in a sport, then you will understand what happens when you are really needing oxygen. And now we're going to be able to explain that. We're going to look over what happens to that. So that was just a handy dandy little introduction to cell respiration. Hope that helps, and I shall see you tomorrow.